नमस्कार, मैं हूं आशुतोष और आप देख रहे हैं सत्य हिंदी। सत्य हिंदी के विशेष कार्यक्रम आशुतोष की बात में आपका स्वागत है। यह हमारा वो कार्यक्रम है जिसमें हम देश दुनिया की तमाम बातें आपके सामने रखने की कोशिश करते हैं, लेकिन उसके पहले एक छोटी सी अपील। सत्य हिंदी की कोशिश है ईमानदार, निडर और निर्भीक पत्रकारिता की। हम अपने लाखों दर्शकों के शुक्रगुजार हैं जो लाखों की संख्या में हमारे कार्यक्रमों को देखते हैं और हमारी हौसला अफजाई करते हैं। हम उनसे एक और छोटी सी गुजारिश करना चाहते हैं कि आप न केवल हमारे कार्यक्रम देखें, बल्कि संभव हो सके तो हमारे वीडियोस को बड़ी मात्रा में डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करें, सर्कुलेट करें और शेयर करें, ताकि ईमानदार पत्रकारिता ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों तक पहुंचे। और आज हम जिस शख्सियत से बात कर रहे हैं उनका नाम है फरीद जकरिया। फरीद जकरिया जो दुनिया के जाने माने इंटेलेक्चुअल हैं, बड़े पत्रकार हैं, और इस वक्त दुनिया में उनकी किताब एज ऑफ रिवोल्यूशंस की धूम है। ये वो किताब है जो इस वक्त दुनिया के नक्शे पर जो कुछ भी हो रहा है, क्यों हो रहा है, किस लिए हो रहा है, इसका जवाब देने की कोशिश करती है। ये किताब दो पार्ट्स में है, 11 चैप्टर्स हैं इसमें, इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन को मिला के। इस किताब को छापा है एलन लेन ने। तो फरीद भाई, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है हमारे इस विशेष कार्यक्रम में। फरीद, आई नो यू यू प्रेफर इंग्लिश, बट माय ऑडियंस इज इन हिंदी, but I'll ask you a question in English. First of all, let me ask a simple question. Why did you write this book? Because we are passing through an age which is so much chaotic, so much anarchic. Are you trying to answer the question that why there is so much chaos in the world, why the old order is crumbling?
Yes, but let me start by saying मुझे माफ कीजिए, मेरी हिंदी इतनी अच्छी नहीं है। बातचीत कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन जतल विचार मैं हिंदी में नहीं कर सकता हूँ। मेरी इंतहाई पढ़ाई अंग्रेजी में हुई, हिंदुस्तान में भी, तो इसलिए मैं अंग्रेजी में बात करूंगा और मुझे मुझे क्षमा कीजिए।
Thank you so much.
So yes, you're absolutely right. The point of the book is to make us realize we're really living in very unusual times where so much is changing. If you think about the world we grew up in, there was a sort of stability to it where you knew, what the dominant framework internationally was. You knew what the dominant framework was within countries. What was it? It was an America-dominated world where America and its European and Asian allies created a stable, open world economy, rules-based system. Within it, every country believed that they were trying to liberalize, open up their economies, create a more, greater space for pluralism, for cosmopolitanism, individual liberty, human rights. That world is clearly changing. We have, in a sense, a very profound transformation of the world taking place. I don't think we can be sure where it's going. I don't think it's as easy to say all those features that I described, now we're going to see the opposite of. I don't think that's happening. But it's a world changing. America is no longer going to play the role of being the dominant player. The European allies and America have major rifts. America is finding more, a common cause with Russia, bizarrely. In Asia, you wonder what the new configuration of power there will be. And domestically, the move toward, unrestricted free markets, free trade, openness, cosmopolitanism, pluralism is more complicated. As each country tries to protect certain elements of its economy. And you can see all these features in a way in India. India is a good microcosm where you're seeing all these changes, even in the context of an India that has changed a lot from the India I grew up in.
In your earlier book, which is called The Post-American World, you have hinted that the America is on decline, and that's why you are talking about the post-American world. Have we really reached in a situation where we can call we are living in a post-American world? How will you describe this disruption? This disruption is because of the technological revolution, which is seen at a mammoth proportion, or you will call it because of the rise of the populist leader world over?
It's a very good question. I think that basically what has happened in the last 30 or 40 years is you have had 2 or 3 big revolutions take place. Technology, for sure, the creation of a digital economy. But there has also been a kind of globalization revolution, which has allowed countries from all over the world to participate in the open global economy, participate in the open world order. And India has been a huge beneficiary of this. You put those two things together, and what you are seeing is the uh, advantages of the West, which have really been in place since the 17th century, I would argue, are dwindling. The advantages of some of the Asian countries are growing. And that change in the balance of power is really the most profound change in modern global history in international relations terms. So the large driver here is not so much that America is declining. It's what I call the rise of the rest. You know, you had the dominance of the West and the rise of the West in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Now you have the rise of the rest. And as the rest rises, naturally, they want a larger share in terms of global management, in terms of voice, in terms of, the kind of things that inevitably are going to be a product of greater economic power. But at the heart of it, are these two revolutions. One, globalization that allowed everyone to participate and grow and plug into global markets, and the digital one, which has accelerated growth and innovation on a scale we've never seen before.
Fareed, in your book, you start with saying that our times are the revolutionary time, but you also said there is a push and the pull dynamics. When you talk about that, there is a forces which want to take the whole world into the future, but there is also a force which wants to take back into the past. So, how you reconcile with this? That this push pull dynamics and revolutionary in both the senses, in taking the country, taking the world at the radical advancement in the future and then into the past.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's the sort of yin and yang of history in a way. For the last 30 years, think about what I was saying. You have had a movement forward, the end of communism, the rise of globalism, the rise of free markets, the rise of free trade. Look at a country like India, which was trapped behind protectionist walls and really not plugged into the world economy in 1989. And now look at it. Look at our Latin American countries, which were all run by military dictatorships in the 1980s, all now, by and large, free market democracies. So, look at China. And so you have these movements forward, but you also had a movement forward in terms of, women's rights, in terms of the rights of other minorities. So you had a kind of opening up and opening up in every sense. Technology platforms were open, politics was more open, economics was more open. And that much change turns out to be very hard for societies to take. And what you start to see is voices that say, stop the train, I want to get off. Or at least slow it down. And so what you're seeing in every society are forces that say, this is too much change. This is not who we are. We have to go back to some, often it's a kind of mythical past. It's a nostalgic past. That past never really existed. But there's an idea that you can go back to some kind of purer, simpler time when you didn't have all this change. And those two forces of push and pull exist. Within there are sometimes within a political party or a movement or a leader, you can have both things going on. So you look at a Donald Trump. On one hand, he loves Elon Musk and he loves some of these cryptocurrency guys. On the other hand, he's saying, I want to take you back to before you had all this crazy gender politics and multiculturalism. And I want, and he keeps remembering the manufacturing economy of the 1950s and 60s. So you have the push and pull within each person. I would argue that Narendra Modi in many ways has that same quality. On one hand, very dynamic, forward-looking technology, growth, innovation. On the other hand, a search for a past of Hindutva that would allow, India to reclaim some glory, apparently, that it had, God knows when.
Farid, you are living in a very interesting time. In a book on a page number 189, you write that the world as a whole was producing far more than it ever had before. Then you said, compared to 1980, global GDP had nearly doubled by 2000 and more than tripled by 2015. When 2000 to 2007 per capita income grew at its fastest rate in history, the global trade increased by 133% between 1990 and 2007. Despite such affluence, prosperity across the world, Why there is so much restlessness, anxiety, pangs? People are emotionally getting very disturbed, and they are basically going back in past and trying to find answers, not from them within, but from outside, like immigrants.
So, Ashutosh, you put your finger on the issue. And
Mm,
only thing I would do is change one word in what you said.
mm,
It's not despite the growth,
mm.
it's because of the growth. In
Oh.
other words,
Mm,
when you have that much growth,
mm,
when you have that much acceleration,
mm,
what we, I think, forgot was, you can have all these new technologies in the world. Human being is the same.
mm,
His heart, his head, his anxieties, his emotions are the same. And so what has happened is that level of change
mm,
has turned out to be very unsettling for people.
mm,
Think about a person living in a small town, right?
mm,
He's suddenly seeing, all the young people are leaving.
mm,
The old traditions are being broken. The old businesses are no longer able to compete with the newfangled businesses. The people come from the cities and transform these places. People don't go to the temples as much as they did. You look at all that, and somebody thinks to himself, my God, my world is disappearing.
mm,
Yeah, he's making more money. Yes, there are more cheap fancy consumer goods in the stores. Yes, he's got a TV that he
mm,
can watch, but it doesn't change that emotional, psychological feeling
mm,
that this is my world is disappearing.
mm, mm,
And that's really what is happening. At the heart of this is people feeling, what happened to the world that I thought was stable was, and the more it changes, the
mm,
more I think you're going to be unsettled by this.
mm,
Imagine what's going to happen once you have AI, and
mm,
you don't even we don't have a concept of
mm,
what work will look like when
mm,
you have a AI that can do everything.
mm. I just want to ask a simple question because we haven't touched about the Donald Trump. The whole world is talking about the Donald Trump. What do you think? Is Donald Trump creator of the chaos or is a child of the chaos?
He's the child of the chaos. I think that
Mm,
because the way to think about it is, it's not just Trump.
mm,
Look at Brexit in Britain.
mm,
Brexit is a kind of, from an economic perspective, a mad idea.
mm,
Britain's biggest market is Europe.
mm,
Okay, 55% of exports from Britain go to Europe. So Britain had tariff-free, tax-free, regulation-free entry into that market.
mm,
And they say, no,
mm,
we want to put barriers. We
mm,
want to put taxes. We want
mm,
to put regulations between us. Why? No, there's no economic explanation. It makes no sense. Economic madness. But there is a political, psychological explanation, which is that the British people felt, we don't want to have that much of our sovereignty handed over to Europe and to Brussels. We want control. We
mm,
want to be the masters of our own fate.
mm,
And that sense of political dignity and control,
mm,
against the forces of globalism is very powerful. It's what Erdogan preaches in Turkey.
mm,
It's what Viktor Orban preaches in Hungary. So
mm,
Trump is part of a global phenomenon. I
mm,
would argue, in some ways, he is the most innovative of all of them,
mm,
because he is very unusual in that he combines, as I say, some very forward-leaning
mm,
pro-technology elements with some very backward-leaning, anti-immigrant, anti-multicultural elements.
mm,
And he's in some ways theoretically not a purist.
mm,
He's
mm,
a pragmatist. He
mm,
mixes and matches here and there, but the
mm,
wave he's riding on
mm.
is very much a wave of backlash against all this progress.
In fact, in one of your podcasts, when the question was asked, what is the Trump doctrine? And you said there is no Trump doctrine. Can you explain that for
It's
our viewers?
Look, Donald Trump is an odd character. He is, above all, I
Mm,
think you have to understand, he's an egotist.
mm,
He's a narcissist.
mm,
He believes, as he has said, I alone can fix things.
mm, mm,
And what that means is that Trump will one day get fascinated by somebody or some idea, and
mm,
he'll adopt it.
mm,
The next day, he's fascinated by another idea which may be contradictory or the
mm,
opposite,
mm,
and he'll accept that. He doesn't think like an academic or an intellectual, that
mm,
are these views consistent. He
mm,
thinks from intuition, from
mm,
instinct, from emotion. I give you an example. He
mm,
says, I don't like globalism. I don't like all these international organizations.
mm,
King Charles tells him the United States should join the Commonwealth.
mm,
Now, what sense does this make? But Donald Trump has said that he's very enthusiastic about this idea. Why? because he likes and respects King Charles. It's as simple as that. Why did he try to make a deal with Kim Jong-un? Every expert told him Kim Jong-un of North Korea will never give up his nuclear weapons. But Trump, somebody told him in the White House, if you can make this happen, you will get the Nobel Peace Prize. So he goes for that, and he put lots of energy and effort. So that's what I mean, Trump is, in some ways, is very transparent. He just looks and says, is this good for me? He used to be totally opposed to cryptocurrency. Then some cryptocurrency people came to him and said, look, if the Biden people are going after these cryptocurrencies, if you become their champion, all the people in America who own cryptocurrency will vote for you. So he says, yes, I like that idea. I'm now in favor of cryptocurrency. So he is very transactional. Now, there are people around him in his world who are much more ideological, who have a more consistent view, which is in some ways scarier, because Trump's pragmatism means, he's never going to go too far.
So how do you visualize the future? Do you think that the kind of disruption which the Trump has taken will lead to a kind of a solution, a new world order, or the total collapse?
So there are two possibilities. One, that Trump's disruption causes a kind of new stability to emerge. Because until now, the reason the world has been stable and rule-based and open and free trade and all the things that have allowed a country like India to grow and prosper has been the Americans, holding that key. So if Trump is saying, I'm tired of this, we're not going to do this anymore, I think there's a real possibility that places like Europe, Japan, Australia, South Korea, even India will start to play a greater stabilizing role. And we'll try to keep the system going, because the system benefits everybody. To have a rule-based system benefits everybody. To have open trade benefits everybody. So you may find that you get a new source of stability, not one single power holding it all up, but a table with many legs rather than having this one big leg. On the other hand, we've never seen that before. Historically, order has been created by empires, by hegemons, by the big power. So it could be a very messy transition. It could go badly, and you could end up in a more like the law of the jungle, which is frankly what the world was like in the 18th and 19th century. Lots of wars, and then when rich countries became rich, they colonized the poor. In a sense, this is what Russia is trying to do in Ukraine. Is recreate the old Russian Empire, where you say, yes, you're my neighbor, but you're much weaker than me, so I have to dominate you.
But Fareed, tell me one thing, because since Second World War, the world has been very, very stable, very, very stable, very, very prosperous, very, very affluent. Are we overreacting? Because the world before Second World War, or the world in 1900 centuries or 1800 centuries, had been more disruptive, more violent. Are we, as an individual or a society, as a country, we are getting scared because because we are too used to the stability?
Look, you're right to say, human life will not disappear if there's more instability. Life goes on, and we will, and particularly, Indians are the greatest survivors in the world. Indians know how to get through anything. That part will continue. But you're right to say that we have gotten used to a very stable, very prosperous world, and we've gotten used to kind of the arrow always pointing in the upward direction, that things got better and better and better. I grew up in India in the 60s and 70s. And if you think about the India then and the India now, things have gotten so much better in India. In terms, India was one of the poorest countries in the world when I left. The per capita GDP was $200. It's now almost $3,000, and probably on its way to 5,000 in a decade. So that reality is one you would hope we can continue. Yes, we will be able to survive if we go back to a world of greater instability and protectionism and nationalism and conflict. But will it be possible to have this, growth? And in India, we have taken 250 million people out of poverty in the last 25 years. Will you be able to take another 250 million people out of poverty if you have this much political tension, if you have much more protectionism? No. India has been India and China have been the two greatest beneficiaries of this period of stability, openness, and prosperity.
Fareed, how do you see India moving ahead during this chaos and disruption?
India is actually pretty well positioned for it. So if all the countries, I would not worry that much about India, because the countries that get hurt the most when these kind of things happen are small countries that depend on trade for their livelihood. You know, the Singapores, the Thailands of the world. India is a huge country with a very large internal economy. So as long as India does continues to do the reforms, continues to do the economic development that it needs to do internally, there is a huge amount of growth that takes place just because Indians themselves are participating in the economy. They're buying, they're selling, they're doing things. Secondly, the Trump tariff wars actually helps India. India is the most protectionist country in the world. It has the most tariff barriers. So if Trump forces India to remove some of those barriers, it will make Indian businesses more competitive. Why does India have so many tariffs, even though it has liberalized in so many areas? Because there are powerful industrial houses in India that want to keep these tariffs because it keeps out foreign competition. It makes it easier for them to sell stuff. I mean, look at liquor in India. Liquor, the duties on imported liquor are 400%. Why? Because there's a billionaire in India who owns all the local liquor production, and he doesn't want the foreign competition. So like that, if in some of these areas you got rid of that, you got more competition, Indians would have more choices, cheaper goods. So, and then you look at the foreign policy side, India is able to play a little bit of a role where it has good relations with America, it has good relations with Europe, it has good relations with Russia, it even has decent relations with China. So it is able, because it's large enough and because everybody needs it, to play a role where it doesn't get trapped on the wrong side of these issues. Now, I think ultimately it will only succeed if it is more closely aligned with the West and with America, because that's where the technology is, that's where the money is, and that's where India's politics is. It's a democracy. But I think it can play this game quite effectively.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I think it was really a privilege to have a word with you. Thank you.
My pleasure, Ashutosh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.